Okay, is this working? Am I online? I have no idea if this is working. I am Sherman D. Manning, author of The Truth About O.J. Simpson, Race, Class, Money, and Justice. And I'd like to know if this is actually working. If this is working, someone please send me an email at shermandmanning@yahoo.com. If this podcast is actually working, if anybody can actually hear me, send me an email at shermandmanning@yahoo.com. Otherwise, I don't know whether this is being broadcast or not. If you're listening to me in Atlanta, Georgia, in New York City, in Switzerland, in Los Angeles, let me know. I need to know if this is working. Donald, anybody that supports Donald for president, this is a sick man. This man said, quote, "If I weren't married, I would screw my own daughter. That's how pretty she is," end quote. What kind of man makes that kind of statement? When I heard it, the hair stood up on top of my head, and I don't have any hair. When I heard it, I got chills. I had to go and regurgitate. What kind of gear does a person put their mind in to even think like you need to think in order to make a statement like that? He said that his daughter is so pretty to him and so sexy to him that if he were not married, he would quote unquote screw his own daughter. How can we take this man seriously? I have been saying all along and will continue to say, and I talk about it in my new book. If you're watching the FX series, The People versus O.J. Simpson, you've got to get the truth about O.J. Simpson, Race, Class, Money, and Justice on Amazon.com or local bookstores. Sherman D. Manning. Look for it. Look for it. I talk about Trump and I talk about Donald in that. I don't like to articulate his last name. Just call him Donald and leave it at that. Any man who can't be trusted to tell the truth about his hair, his own hair. This is a man who we can't not trust with the codes to the nuclear arsenal. And I'm not joking about that. And if someone were to say, well, that's his personal business, I would concur with that assessment. It is his personal business until he makes it the business of the American people. When a man goes on stage, as did Donald, and has a woman to come down at a rally and says to her, "Pull my hair. Is this really my hair?" And she says, "Yes." He has now made it an issue. He is a pathological liar. And pathology, as he talked about with Ben Carson, pathology is incurable. So Donald has an incurable disease. Any man who is that narcissistic, any man who is that vain, I mean, this is more narcissism than I've ever in my lifetime seen, 43 years on the planet, in any human being. There's something wrong with this man. If Vladimir Putin were to endorse me for anything, quite frankly, I would be so embarrassed about it that I would hope nobody found out about it. But instead, because he's a narcissist, Donald took that endorsement, for lack of a better word, and ran with it. He ran with it. And to be quite frank with you, Donald has been endorsed by Charles Manson. I just left Manson. Donald was endorsed by Eric Menendez, Lyle Menendez. He was endorsed by Joe Son. He was endorsed by Rod Alcala. I just left these guys. I just left them. Remember, I made it out of hell alive and lived to tell about it. And I always said that if I ever got out of prison on this wrongful conviction, you would never shut me up. And so let me be clear. I was wrongly convicted of rape. And I'm supposed to run and hide like most guys who were wrongly or rightly convicted of it do when they get out and hope that nobody sees them. That's not going to happen. I'm going to do everything that the law tells me I must do until we can overturn this case. Listen, if anyone can hear this broadcast, please send me an email at shermandmanning@yahoo.com. SHERMAN DMANNING at yahoo.com to let me know that this is actually being broadcast. I'm new to this technology. I'm new to podcast, etc. But I do know how to talk. I was at Loyola Marymount College on yesterday with the Voices of Justice program, and I met some very interesting people there, and plan on going back to speak again with all deliberate speed. And it was quite telling to me to see this group of educated men and women at this institution of higher learning who are matriculating in one of the top universities in the country, and how open-minded they were, and how receptive they were, and how they didn't treat me like I was some kind of a plague because society, or the court system rather, has said I was guilty of something that I did not do. So it was a blessing, to be honest with you, to be there. And I intend to do more of that, to go to universities and give talks and just be candid and just be clear and just be transparent. I'm wrongly convicted of rape. If you think I did it, then you stay away from me and I'll stay away from you. You don't call me, I assure you that I won't be calling you, because the system sets it up for us to fail. And that's what bothers me more than anything. The American taxpayers have invested an $81 billion investment per year, which means that in 12 years we spent $1 trillion on the penological system, because we've been building prisons all over this country, but we have not built universities. We have not built schools. We have not built libraries. I was saying to someone the other day, in fact, to the guru of restorative or restorative justice programs over at Loyola yesterday, Professor Scott Wood, I was explaining to him that I read a study which indicated that penologists and criminologists are now looking at third grade test scores, and they use those test scores to determine how many prisons they must build 20 years from now. Now, ideally, if they're really looking at those test scores and can determine to a scientific certainty, if you will, that certain students will end up in prison. My question is, instead of investing in building the prisons to house them after they have offended, why not immediately pour more resources into educating them while they're in the third grade, teaching them to read, to write, to count, to think. I just left prison, and I'm going to say to you that more than 70% of the guys in the California prison system read at a third grade level or less, okay? And then you have a percentage that read at about the seventh grade level, and some are just functionally illiterate. I would guesstimate that only 10% of California state prison inmates can read at or above the 10th grade level. Ipso facto, this is why a lot of people commit crimes. I just watched it. I just witnessed it. I just came through it myself. I'm an experiential expert on criminal justice by default, quite frankly. And I can recall an incident wherein, well, several off the top of my head, but one in particular, an incident where there was a gentleman who was standing in a very aggressive manner. And he said to me, "Hey, check this out. Let me get at you, Holmes." And to myself, I said, "Oh, Lord, we're getting ready to fight here." So I had my fight or flight mentality on. So I balled my fists and, began to psychologically prepare myself for this assault that was going to take place, that I did not intend to lose. And the guy looked at me and, to make a long story concise, asked me if he could move into the cell with me and be my cellie. So, roommate, as we would call it in civilian life. So he wanted nothing aggressive. He was not in any way being cantankerous or violent or vicious or obstreperous or bellicose. He wanted to move into the room with me. And it dawned on me, and it was an aha moment for me, that this man had absolutely no clue. He had no clue that his mannerisms and his gesticulations were violent. He had no clue that the way he projected himself was inappropriate. He had no clue whatsoever. And this is one of the problems that leads to prisons in the first place. This is one of the problems that leads to fights, violent assaults, and things of that nature because people do not have the adequate, proper communication skills. I digress, but don't know how to communicate properly. And he had no clue that that was inappropriate. And he had no clue that I was about to take his head off of his shoulders because I thought he was after me. And there was another incident where there was a very large African American brother that I didn't like and didn't think he liked me either. And we would always have conflicts and misunderstandings. And one day I had an aha moment with him when he wrote me a missive. And I read the note, ladies and gentlemen, if you could hear me out there. And again, if you can hear this, if anybody can hear this, I need to know because I don't know this technology well at all and I'm learning it. And I want to know if this is actually broadcasting. Stop what you're doing. Write down my email. Sherman D. Manning is pretty easy. Sherman D. Manning at yahoo.com. Sherman D. Manning at yahoo.com. Write me a quick email and tell me I heard you. Just let me know that someone can hear this. I'm sure there's a way I can verify it online or what have you, but I don't know what I'm doing. So this big fella, back to the story, wrote me a missive, and as I began to peruse the missive in a cursory manner, it occurred to me, my God, this guy misspelled the most basic words. Boat, B-O-A-T, he couldn't spell. True, T-R-U-E, he could not spell. And from that day forward, I changed my approach in dealing with him. I dumbed down every conversation that we ever had. And I'm not being condescending, ladies and gentlemen. I'm being candid. I'm telling you, I had to learn that, number one, he was suffering from an inferiority complex because he felt stupid, even though I don't call him that. I simply say he wasn't educated. There's a lot of people who are not educated, and you can be ignorant to certain subjects. I am ignorant when it comes to technology. I am ignorant in that way. Doesn't mean that I'm stupid. I'm just ignorant. I don't know that. And so this fella was walking around, perhaps 6 feet 1 inch tall, 200 pounds of muscle, and he felt like a dummy. And when he dealt with a guy like me who was a little bit shorter, 6 feet, a little bit slimmer, 180, and he thought that I thought I was more intelligent than him. And you know how it is when someone actually thinks you look down on them and you do not, what that can do to their psyche and what that can do to your relationship or association or acquaintanceship with this person. And so I had to realize that. So we have literally millions of people in this country growing up with terrible communication skills, and it starts with reading. If you don't teach a person to read adequately, Ambassador Andrew Young told me when I was a 12-year-old little boy that only 3% of the world population are the movers and the shakers. And he said all of these people, basically 99% of them, read at least one book a week. And they read several newspapers every day. And I was fortunately in love with reading from the time I was a kid up until now. I read omnivorously. I read inspiration, self-help, motivation, fiction, nonfiction, criminal justice, social justice, politics, business, marketing, entrepreneurship, technology, tech books. Lord, if I had not read some technology books while incarcerated in hell, I would really be lost when I got out right now. And so, back to the subject at hand, Black Lives Matter. Keep that in mind. And I address that in my book, The Truth About O.J. Simpson, Race, Class, Money, and Justice, which is available at local bookstores and on Amazon.com. If you're watching the FX series, The People versus O.J. Simpson, you've got to get this book. And if you want to know what my connection to O.J. is, it is lawyers. One of his attorneys was DNA expert, world-renowned attorney Bob Blazier, and Bob Blazier was also my attorney. And so I watched the trial and followed it closely and had some inside information and decided to put it in book form. But I've written 22 books, ladies and gentlemen, and I suggest that you get a hold of them and read them, and I think that they will elucidate a lot of issues as it pertains to criminal justice, social justice, and to politics. But somebody needs to call Donald up and tell them that Black Lives Matter. Somebody needs to call up Marco Rubio, call up Ted Cruz, Bad News Cruz, that is,